Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke and apologies for the delay this morning. Oh wow, got a beautiful sunrise. I'm just looking at it out the window. This is why I still have my fake light on and I didn't turn the big light on because it is really beautiful. Good morning, Joanne. I got your text message and I'll respond to that afterwards. And good morning, Melissa. And good morning, Pat. Yeah, and again, apologize for being late. I went to go sign on. I got a poor connection, and then I had to, so I got out of everything, reset everything, and then put it back on. Plus, I was still brewing my second cup of coffee, so, yeah. So anyway, good afternoon, Sam. And, and Pat's in the car. Okay, that's right. Good luck today, Pat. Good luck. Everything's gonna go great. So, yes, Pat's, off for her, off to, first day of her new job, so it's very good. And mine's whacked too, my Wi-Fi. Oh, it's raining by you. You know, it's so funny. I woke up and I was thinking, I'll bet it's raining in New Hampshire. I don't know why that jumped into my head, but because I'm looking outside, we've got this beautiful kind of, I'm going to call it kind of a Neapolitan sky because it looks almost like vanilla, not quite chocolate and strawberry, but yes. Oh yeah, she'll be great. Now we don't have Alex on today. I do while I have Pat and I have Joanne, I just want to mention that we might have to move Thursday. Like we might have to postpone the 17th class. I talked to Kate Kinsbury last night, and she sounded like it hurt me to listen to her. She sounded so sick. So if she might be better enough to do the class on Thursday. Oh, and Alex, you're here. Okay, I missed you somehow in there. Good morning, Alex. I'm sorry. I just didn't see you pop on. So apologies for that. Okay, good. So I've got the three of you here. Kate is as sick as a dog. She messaged me yesterday, and she had said that she might have to postpone the Thursday class. So if she does, then what we're going to do is, no worries, my connection was weird. Yeah, it's a weird morning for connections. I don't know, it's really odd. What we're going to do is, if she can't do the 17th, and she might still do the 17th, then we'll just do the class on the 24th. And then I'll kind of privately DM everybody to find out if there's another day we can do the seminar. It could be the day after, it could be early the next week, because I'm doing the next class after that on Wednesday. So sometime before then, just trying to fit that in so that we get both components in. But she just sounds like she barely has a voice, and you know how it is when you have a sore throat and you're trying to talk like a really sore throat, like you have strep. I mean, I don't know that she has strep, but she just sounds like I was just like, oh God, she may not be in good shape. So. And she was very frustrated and apologetic, but no problem. Okay, cool. I'll message all of you separately. But since I had everybody here on the live stream, I was like, let me just mention that. Okay. So just that little piece of business out of the way. It is a beautiful morning here, and it is a day off for me. Good morning, Suda. It is my quote-unquote day off, and my sister is actually coming to help me wash my skylights, because my skylights are absolutely filthy, thanks to the spotted lanternflies that drop goop all over my windows. Hopefully they're starting to die out now. So we will be doing that. She'll be coming over at 9:30, and good morning, April. And we're going to go do our morning walk after that. So, today I plan to have I've been trying to take my days off. I mean, I've been doing my live streams and stuff, and I do have a bunch of stuff I want to upload today. I want to upload a bunch of these to Liminal Tarot, which I haven't done, and I also want to upload the Cattonia live stream that I did yesterday, which interestingly ended up being on the subject of initiation, and I was looking at it more from an academic perspective, looking at Merch Eliad's Rites and Symbols of Initiation, and because the actual class that I'm giving for the ISFM on October 30th is going to be about Persephone, Hecate, and rituals of initiation. So, so I ended up getting onto that topic yesterday, and this morning I got an email from April Shaley, who's an astrologer. I follow her, and she had mentioned that this full moon, this Aries full moon, that is going to be coming what is it? I guess it's on the 17th is the Aries full moon. She's calling this a moon of initiation. Okay. So, and actually that is on Thursday, isn't it? It's a moon of initiation, and one of the things she had mentioned about it was that we were going to have to accept certain imbalances in order to get to a, like, at least momentarily or temporarily, to get to a higher level of balance, which is interesting, just given some of the different situations that people have had. So there's this sense of, that we are, and actually the Azrael message I had this morning, which is another reason I was kind of late getting started today, was that he had mentioned that, I kept having, I mentioned the night visitor I had the other night for yesterday's kind of ghost story. Well, I had the same visitor again last night. And I said, well, because I always do protections. I do protections before bedtime. I do protections when I get up in the morning. And I'm like, why is this individual, if they don't have positive intent, why are they getting into this space? And they said, because they have an ancestral attachment to you, and because you haven't, and you haven't let go of it. Suda, I was worried about that. Yeah. They said you haven't that's because, in other words, there's an attachment there. There's a cord that has to be cut or broken. And, this is not somebody who I probably ever knew. I do remember when I saw Patricia Weston in Ireland a couple of years ago when I had reading with her at her house. She had said, oh, there is somebody who is just, you have this ancestral figure who's very angry and very vocal and doesn't like what you're doing, doesn't like anything that you're doing. She says, but all the females around you are just laughing at him because, he's just... But apparently it's this individual, and Pat had picked up, actually, that there was a connection to fairy, because when I actually was having this, she started looking up... We had done a class on pendulums, right? And so she was looking up bluestone pendulums, because I had mentioned how the fairies basically stole my bluestone pendulum when I was in Moitura. And so she was kind of looking, I don't know, she was kind of just looking around it, but at the same time that this individual came in, and she thought, oh, what does that mean? Is that like a bad omen? Is that not good? And I said, well, I don't think so. I think it's just kind of pointing to me. This, what Azrael said was, no, this is a person who was, would have been, remember when we were talking about that story in Sligo, the Abbey Quarter tomb, where they stuck this big cross in the middle of this megalithic tomb because they were, to try to keep the fairies at bay. He would have been one of those type of people. And so somebody very disliked by the fairies who actually has an attachment to me. Okay, cool. So yeah, so now okay. So that was just kind of pointing out, it was like a synchronicity that kind of pointed out the attachment. So in any case, now that I'm clear about it, I know what I have to do about it. Bad man. Yeah, exactly. And really it's really interesting that he comes up or is coming back now, because this is at the end of this Capricornian, Pluto and Capricorn kind of era. Now, Azrael mentioned something about 11 days this morning. He said he says the receivers, when he refers to people who, boo, which is funny. He refers to people who are, like the psychics who are making some of these predictions about what we're moving into, especially the ones who see doom ahead. He calls them the receivers, is what he calls them. Sam just says, I just wrote an essay about Fae and ancestral stuff. It's on my Substack. Oh, cool. Yeah. Actually, I definitely want to check out your Substack. And I do want to mention, too, that Sam is going to be offering readings. So I saw that on your page, too. So if you want to book with her, definitely go on her page. You do color readings, I think, is one of the new things that you're offering. And that sounds really cool. So, that, and check out her Substack as well. Yes. I think she does... Yeah, I think she does have a link in her bio, but of course, yeah, she can tell you. So that's, because it's weird, because Sam and I seem to be on the same wavelength with a lot of stuff. Maybe it's that Jersey connection, I don't know, but we seem to be on the same wavelength with a lot of stuff. Yes, share it. But this ancestor, interestingly, is not an ancestor from Ireland, even though I have an Irish ancestry. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Of course. Absolutely. Anytime. Yeah. I always want to share what people are doing. It's, if I can do that, if I have a platform to do that, I can do that. And it's definitely in her bio. So, okay, cool. So I have, but this ancestor is actually from my mother's side, which is all Eastern European. It's, Polish, it's, and Slovakian, like, Carpathian Slovakian. type of energy, and basically what I've been told about this energy is that he's like it's not a threat to me, but it is something. But the Fae don't like this particular individual, and that creates a limitation or a problem when I'm working with them. Which I had, weird Jersey, yeah, exactly, and Jersey is an extremely weird place, but it's. She mentioned Dracula. Yeah, the Carpathians, when we think the Carpathians, I mean, we're not calling quite Transylvania here, but they are, this part of Slovakia is kind of on the border of Poland, and it's very near to the foothills of the Carpathians. So, and April says agreed here, yeah. There's something that's going on, and, okay, so he was talking about the receivers, Azrael was talking about the receivers. And he said, but a lot of them, whoever's receiving the false information, he said they've kind of gotten through that. That's already out there. He says, but there's no truth in what they've been told. He said, there's no truth in what they've been told. He still very much sticks to the narrative that, no, we are not moving into Age of Aquarius is not where we're all going to be doomed and have machine overlords and he said, and have it, because this the way of thinking is going to be going along with, I feel like the way that we've been going, particularly with technology and so forth, is very Capricornian in the way that it's doing it. It's about productivity. It's about money. It's about how can we save money and replace people in a way that, and again, it's understood that there's going to be certain kinds of manual jobs that are going to be replaced by machines. Okay. It's what happens. Some people get very angry about it, but it's like, well, this is kind of, the whole point is to make things more efficient, rather than having to hire a lot of staff and, in certain things, like my mother freaks out. She even hates self-check at the grocery store. It's like, I don't like anything like that. Well, these things are here. It doesn't necessarily get rid of all people, but it does kind of lessen those jobs. There are a lot of jobs that are done by robots now that are not done by people. But when it comes to creative work, that's where the problem comes in. People saying, oh, we're going to replace artists and writers and, and actors and with AI, and that's where the problem comes in. That was actually a big part of the writer's strike this year. But I don't feel that field me is very Capricornian. It's very corporate. It's very much saying like, oh, how can we improve our bottom line by having by using fewer resources. And my friend's son had actually mentioned when we were playing D&D, he said, there's a lot of places that invested in, they fired all their artists because he works in gaming, and he said, at least he works on some gaming projects anyway, and he said, they fired a lot of their artists, and they just said, no, we're just going to use AI. And because AI just cannibalizes, it just scrapes what's already there. It's already at the bottom of the barrel. And they said what it's producing is so awful that corporations now have to hire artists back just to fix the crap that AI has done. And that's why there seems to be, that's why he says that he's not as confident that the future of AI, that everything's going to go that way. It's kind of like, you think about Zuckerberg with his virtual reality, like the whole thing that he invested in, and like literally nobody cares about it. Or even the kinds of virtual reality when people were buying real estate in these virtual spaces. It was like a thing in the early 2000s, and you don't even hear anybody talk about it anymore. So I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it's hopeful that something like AI is not going to go that way. I feel like there's a lot of pushback because that is part of what makes us human. That's what allows us. That's what I was talking about yesterday. And when we talk about initiations, you're talking about kind of going back to a beginning. You're going back to a time where there is some kind of knowledge, some kind of mystery or knowledge about how things are. And it's like tapping into that mystery and into what it is. It's not just, Eliab was talking about, yes, baptism might be considered an initiation, for instance, or making confirmation or whatever in the church. But he said, but that's not, it doesn't carry the gravitas of an initiation. An initiation is an ordeal. Now, some occult groups do have initiations of such. But, Eliad says he was dubious of how beneficial they are. Now, having been through some of them, I can say that they do have a transformative quality, but it tends to be more on a personal level. Like a lot of these other initiations were more about your role in the community, and a lot of them were around life cycles, which is the reason I had brought it up yesterday, because my talk is going to be on life cycles and some of these myths of the underworld. Because these are the stories. But he said nowadays where these stories come from, like you have to read them in literature. You find the motifs of these truths in literature. You find them in art. He says, it exists as what he called chiefly in distractions. It comes through though that's where the ideas end up being expressed, which is why at the school I'm very focused on people doing something creative, because the idea is that the initiation comes by allowing something to be expressed through you. It's not so much about how we can mentally plan something. I mean, obviously, if people are doing an academic paper or something like that, then that's going to be it's going to be a little bit of a different thing that we're using. And of course, that's perfectly fine. But you can have truths that come out through those as well. Truth can come out really anywhere, but it's not so much of an intellectual exercise. Like, you can't be initiated just by reading a book. Okay. Words are not sufficient. And in fact, most initiatory things are not written down. If we think about the ancient mysteries, things were not written down. The Druids didn't write stuff down. The Orphic mystery cults, we know very little about them because it's only been certain things that are inferred here and there that we know anything about what the rites might have been like. But we always try to look at them from a perspective that has been desacralized. Like, our world is a very profane world. We don't live in a world where people assume the sacred. And when people want to connect to nature, you can't connect to nature because we've kind of lost the element of mystery. We're always trying to approach it from a very cerebral point of view. And I think that's, without tribal, we can't go back to tribal initiations and so forth in this kind of culture. And I'm not even suggesting that necessarily that's what we need to do. But you kind of lose the thread on terms of what does this mean to be in society, and what does it mean to be part of this, and what does it mean to be human and to be living in the world and to be an expression of what we can think of as source, and that's something that is as much as we may want it, it's really something alien to us. We talk about grounding and connecting to nature by, I don't know, going outside and, just sitting outside or hugging a tree or something like that. And honestly, I mean, yeah, there's nothing wrong with doing any of those things, but it's not that same profound connection that you have to the numinous, to what's there, to the mystery of what's there, which is something that we kind of write off or take for granted. This is why people now look at myth as something like, oh, well, this is just before people had science, that's how they thought. They thought supernatural entities ruled everything, ha ha. It's like, well, there is a sacred element to the world. And that's what I think that's why a lot of people are on spiritual paths. They want to connect to it, but it's very hard to connect to it in a space where we are separated from it, where we are, where we just the way that our intellect, our human consciousness has developed. It's very hard to do that. Suda says, fair point, language is limiting, especially as there are so many languages. Well, yeah, exactly. It's funny, that's the Tower of Babel thing, like at least in the biblical conception, the idea that creating all these different languages kind of creates that kind of chaos as well. And also in different languages, you'll find that depending on the culture, you're going to have different words or different ideas to express different things. Like there's a lot of concepts in other languages that English doesn't cover very well, But yeah, and language is an adaptation that we have. And most of what we think of as history and civilization comes from writing, Alex says, is it possible to engage with the numinous without a group or lodge or without a specific path? Seems like you need to have some framework. Well, that's a good question. I think, to be completely honest with you, I think most initiations happen outside of those groups. Now, again, depends on. I feel like if you are on this kind of path, I've had initiations that have come on trips. I've had initiations that come in dreams, or just certain things that you may pass through in your life. Eliade mentions the specific points in life where we look back and say what they call the quote unquote midlife crisis, where we turn back and we go, did I just waste the last X number of years? Have I been on the wrong path the whole time? Because initially what we do is we get on a path that tells us what society wants. And then that path of breaking everything down and then trying to come back from it again in a more authentic way, that's kind of where my mind was headed exactly. Yes, and I would agree with that. Yes, that's really where authentic initiation comes in. I mean, sure, there are some people who may engage in some initiations that are like people who engage with voodoo or with certain maybe African traditions or things like that are very authentic to those tribes. But how much somebody from outside of those tribes is going to get out of those initiations I don't know. I mean, it's, I don't know. I guess it's different for every person. I guess I would say that I've had people say that I've heard in communities where they will say, well, those are the only kind of authentic initiations. Maybe if you're, there may be in terms of maybe if we're trying to get back to some original idea of it. But I do think it's possible to have authentic initiation. The question is, how do you have an authentic initiation when you are living in this intellectual space, or do you have to break that intellectual space? I was throwing a few cards before I started this morning, and one of the things I got again was the card of conditioning. Breaking conditioning. Breaking out of the way we've been conditioned to see the world. I think when you have a major shift in worldview, that is a type of initiation. Okay, and that's why I think April was saying, different April. This was April Shaley. I mean, I know that April Edwards on here from Moon Gemini LLC, and she does a really great tarot channel too. You should follow her as well if you don't. It's very much. She had said this morning that it was that there's an element of initiation here, that there's an element of trying to that we are moving out of one worldview and one mode into a completely different one, and this is not just happening to us individually, it's happening collectively. So it's a question of how do we respond to it. Are we going to go with where our soul? Are we going to get on the soul train? And no comparison to the TV show that they had in the 70s. Maybe it was the 80s too. But it's like when you're following your soul, I mean, that's a path. It's like you kind of have to let it take you where you're going. And that's an initiation in and of itself. But, initiations do kind of put you in this middle space. And, they put you in that liminal space. And yeah, so it's a question of how do you Sue is laughing. How do you move through that space? And how do we come out on the other side? And that's part of the problem, because a lot of times intellectually we can say, okay, I know something's ending, I know something's beginning, but we don't. I said, to me, something initiatory is something experienced in the body. It's not just if you've had any true numinous experience, it's something outside of your intellect, and that's what you need to confront. And it's not something that we can just necessarily plan for or make happen. In theory, somebody who has some kind of elder or tribal wisdom wouldn't be able to know how to what the steps would be for you to achieve that knowledge or move into that new state. But in our society, we're kind of stuck doing it on our own, and that's really the hard part. We don't know what we're doing. Right from the time of, I think I was talking about when people enter puberty. Technically, in a tribal setting, that would be a point of initiation, where you're initiated into adulthood. We don't initiate anybody into adulthood. I mean, yeah, there are certain little rites of passage that people have depending on their religion, but oftentimes they just become more of an excuse for a party. They're not an ordeal. You're not sent out to like to the wilds for 6 months and scarified and terrified. You're not put through something like that. And Alex says, right, there's no elders or people to guide us because they don't know either. No, and the thing is, you have to be careful of people who represent themselves as elders too. I'm not saying there aren't authentic people out there, but anybody, what was that thing? What was the Kansas song? If you claim to be a wise man, it surely means that you don't know. It's like, yeah, there's the wise person knows that they don't know. It's just a matter of, so really when we're dealing with myth, it's like we're just trying to see like, okay, how can we interpret the guide signs? How do we interpret them for ourselves? Because we don't have a collective mythology. Wish I'd met you years ago. Thank you. Yeah, and again, I don't claim to be a wise person either, just to be clear. But I spent a lot of time studying this because this is something that I have my whole life I've had an interest in, and I have had some numinous experiences. That doesn't make me a qualified initiator, but that's why I feel like I have this kind of vocation in terms of trying to help people navigate those spaces. Ultimately, everybody has to navigate their own space their own way. I don't have a particular initiation ritual or something like that people can do. But there's a sense here of, looking at what's going on in people's individual path and saying, okay, well, here's the guide signs that are appearing along the way. How might we look at these? How might you look at these? How might they, what might they be saying about your next direction? Okay. And so that's what I do, or what I would claim to do. I can't, beyond that, I don't, if I don't know, each individual will, I think all of us can be potentially initiators of each other too, because it's almost like sometimes we encounter people and they have the right thing for us at the right time. You know what I mean? And that's how it ends up working out. And it's like having gurus and things like that as well. But you always have to be careful, because particularly in esoteric groups and so forth, and within certain schools of Hinduism, Buddhism, there is this, you fully believe that? Yeah, there's certain Hindu, where people will claim to be masters or claim to come from a certain lineage, and they don't. They have an agenda. It's very difficult to find people in those communities, especially in the occult community, who don't have an agenda of some kind. And so, there are plenty of people out there who don't have an agenda, but I've run into many of them. And, even if it's it's very, very hard. And if somebody doesn't know where they're going, they could easily be led off the path by somebody. True. So I don't know. Or the seeker is met with gatekeeping. Right. Exactly. Well, interestingly, that's how I left Catholicism, because when I started having experiences, I had priests telling me, "Oh, you're not eligible for that experience." And I said, "Well, I don't know, something's happening. If you're not going to help me, I'm going to go figure it out on my own." And Alex is saying, "Absolutely, very much agree, even if it's just financial gain and clout." Yeah, and there's a lot of people who do that, and that's why people who do a lot of what we do, like you'll see people who say, psychics are all hucksters or something, and Sudha says, "Oh God, this." Yeah, exactly. Oh, don't tell me no. Don't tell me no. Yeah, right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, I've often likened it to when you have an experience of the numinous, it's almost like falling in love, in the sense that, but you're falling in love with the divine. And when you have that experience and you want to go to your religious leaders because this is the experience you've had, you've been touched by something that's in that sacred space, and you want to connect with it, and you're told, people like you don't do that. Don't be silly. You're obviously just worried about, I remember priests saying, "Oh, what's your real problem? Did you break up with a boyfriend or something?" Really condescending kind of stuff. And think about it as kind of like having the parents who don't approve of that divine relationship. So what do? You elope, you run off. You run off and you do it the non-approved way. And that's the way I see why a lot of people get involved with esotericism, because they're on a path and they're saying the traditional paths are not only are they dead in terms of initiation, but they're dead in terms of being able to answer what your soul is calling for. You're not able to do it. So for me, I always feel like that's such a great analogy. Yeah, and that was the way I always saw it, because to me, it was almost like a love affair. It's like a mystical experience, and they don't want you to have mystical experiences. You just have to be the ordinary person who just sits there, and if you're going to have mystical experiences, then you have to join the clergy and be under the eye of somebody all the time, because we know better. The problem is they don't. They don't know. They don't know anything about these kinds of experiences, and they don't know how to help people who are in certain types of spiritual crises. They're only looking at it maybe from a strictly psychological, they're only trying to understand these from strictly a psychological or counseling point of view, which, is helpful to certain people, but people who are really kind of in this, I think Joanne probably would understand that too, because Joanne is trained in that field, but she's also somebody who has dealt with, taken, shamanism and indigenous populations and so forth. You learning about mysticism and understanding that it's not, there's a psychological component to it that can help us, connect with it, but it's not. But that's just yeah, indeed, that's just a piece of it. There's a spiritual piece of it. Falling in love with the divine. That's my experience symbolically. I'm glad this can be a global thing. Yeah. Well, that to me is also connecting with the feminine. Think about it. I mean, if we've been in a very masculine biased world, it's like, okay, now we've got to bring the feminine in. We've got to bring that balance in. Now, whatever that means for people, I recognize that it's not just, man-woman relationships anymore. Or I shouldn't say anymore, probably ever. It's not always been that. It's just that's all we ever really talked about. But the idea is that there's something that's going to have those two components, however that plays out. And so even in relationships that are same sex, there's still a masculine feminine component that plays out, and and we've been living a world that's very, very lopsided, that's been very based on fear and rules and shame, and you better know your place, and you better not jump the fence, and you better not and what's going to happen to you if you don't do it the way we're told, and you just need to be a good little worker and a little drudge, and that way of thinking is dying off. And it's kind of like you only have to look a little bit out in the culture to see what's going on. I know a lot of us hate social media, but it's just like sometimes you got to look in that sphere to kind of see what's happening. So anyway, so that was kind of my thought for the day. I didn't tell you my little story for the day. I always try to do a little spooky story for the day. And I was trying to think of some of the other ones that had happened to me. And I'll tell you about the one I had last night in my YouTube feed. Children of the Stones came up. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that TV series. It was a British children's TV series from 1977. Joanne says, I've seen so many disgusting attitudes lately. Well, remember though, we're seeing we're seeing this imbalance before we're seeing the balance. Okay, it's kind of, we're seeing what's in shadow first. I think probably even the last, since 2008 at least, what's been coming out is you actually have seen that show. Okay, so Alex, you've seen it. It was really funny because Millbury, of course, is Avebury. It's the largest stone circle in Britain, and it's actually inside of a village. Okay, and it's amazing to me how many people have never heard of Avebury, because Avebury is near Stonehenge, and it's almost as famous. But it does get a lot of visitors. But the show actually takes place, in fact, Mrs. Warner's store in that, her little store where she sells ice cream and whatever she does, is actually my friend Donna's shop now, Elements of Avebury. And I often stay with Donna and Steve when I do go to Avebury. And this story actually comes from a time when I stayed with the two of them. They actually own a house kind of right across the street. They call it the Silbury House B&B. And there is one room that overlooks, I don't think it's the Cove Stone. There's a stone that's right out the window, right there. And let me get these messages first, then I'll tell you my story. Joanne says, it's basically hypocrisy, othering, shaming. It's terrible, does not promote unity. You can say the same message in a mindful and educating way. Well, that's it. And I think these kinds of things have to come to the surface. It's almost like Steve Judd uses the rather disgusting analogy of the pimple on the boil, the top of the boil, that has to break. You have to get the crud out in order to get to what's healthy. So I think we're still in this stage where we're still having this push where we're still seeing the end of the crud. And I think Joanne, unfortunately, seeing a lot of the crud. Wild. You have a friend who lives in that area also. Yeah, I didn't when I went to school, I wasn't that far away from there. I went to school in Reading, and basically if you want to get to hot tip, if you're visiting England or live in England and want to go visit Avebury, the easiest way to do it is from London is to go to Swindon. Swindon's very close to Reading. It's like maybe 1 or 2 stops. It's not very far. And then from Swindon, if you walk over, across the street, there's a bus station on the other side. It's like you have to cross from the train station, you kind of go down this alley, and then make a left, and then you kind of see it across the street. And in the the pimples on the face of life. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, that's an analogy he tends to use in his things, and I'm like, that's a really gross analogy, but it's kind of one. But okay, so and then there's a bus, and I can't remember. I don't remember if it's stall 7 or 9. It's basically you have to walk back. It's like the 4th stall from the back. It says Avebury on there, and it's like £2.50 to get to Avebury from there. And you'll know that you're at Avebury because you're going to go in the village and you're going to see the frickin' stones. So yeah. So anyway, if people want to go there, that's I first time I ever went there was when I was an undergraduate, and I've been there, and energetically that place is just wild. It's just the first time I went there, I literally felt like I'd been hit. It's like I'd stuck my finger on an electrical outlet. It was crazy. I've gotten used to the place over the years, but Children of the Stones is set there. And I remember actually, I was during Storm Eunice. I couldn't leave because all the pub transport. So Donna said, "We'll put you in another room, and just charge you like a bedding fee. It was like 20 quid or something, and you can just stay there for the night." And basically, I was watching Children of the Stones on my laptop while I was looking at the Red Lion, the pub in there right across the street. And I was like, "This is kind of cool. It's like kind of meta, They're walking in there, and I'm looking at it right here." So. But what happened to me when I was there in February of 2022, I was originally in this room that overlooks the Stones, and I love being, I'm like, whenever I book it, I'm like, I need to have that room. And Steve usually puts me in that room. He'll just be like, okay, if that's what's available, that's what they give me. But I remember I had done a meditation with Sue Coulson, who runs Cosmic Classroom, and I've always done them over Zoom with her, and she's like, this is so weird, because I was with her in the hen shop in Avebury, and I was like in the next room just so I wouldn't, create feedback on Zoom, but, and then she said afterwards, she says, let's go for a walk, because I always go visit the Stones, and it was a full moon in Leo. I remember that. It was a full moon in Leo. But it was raining. It was overcast and raining. So I think we maybe got a real quick glimpse of the moon, like as the clouds went by, but it was not, it was a cloudy and overcast night. That's important. Now, I went back into my room. Now, you can see part of the Swindon Road, so you can see headlights, you can see cars coming. But the stone is right in front of my window, practically. I mean, not that I could reach out and touch it, but I can see, I can see it. So I would, got myself a coffee, and I was just sitting looking out the window. And all of a sudden, because I noticed there was this light, it was this bright flash of light. And I thought, okay, maybe somebody's outside with a flashlight or something like that. But then I looked at the bottom of the stone. It almost looked like a little rectangle, almost like a little fireplace. It was like a little rectangle, and it would erupt into this bright orange. It almost looked like a flame, and it would be there for a minute, and then it would go out. And it kept doing that, and I'm like, what the frig is that? Like, what is it? Because I'm looking around, I'm like, okay, there's no other lights. I'm trying to remember if the Red Lion was open. It might have been closed then, actually. I'm not sure 100%. I'm trying to remember what the situation was with that. Because they were closed for renovation, so you didn't even have the lights from the pub. And I was in the backyard, they don't have the lights on in their backyard. Now, sure, sometimes people walk around there and stuff, but this was not people, and this was not a torchlight. This was not a flashlight, okay? And it was just this bright, like almost like a flame coming out of the ground, but it was just like in the bottom of this stone. And I have video of it, actually, although you can't really see that. You just see this flash that comes in, and you hear me swearing my head off going, what the F is that? I mean, I couldn't tell what it was. And I would see a car come by, and I could compare, that it wasn't the same thing. And I thought, then later I thought there had been something on the ground, and I thought, well, maybe it's just a reflection of that. Maybe that's what I saw. But it was bright. It looked like fire. I mean, it looked like flame. And then the next night when I stayed and the sky conditions were similar, it didn't happen. So I'm like, okay, so it's not just a reflection of this thing, whatever it is on the ground. Something weird happened, and it happened on the full moon in Leo. I still don't know what it is. To me, like my gut was like, this is some kind of fairy activity, because there's a lot of that fairy activity, and you'll also hear about UFO sightings and stuff in that area. They're very prominent. And there's another experience I had when I was in Avebury as well. Another time when I stayed at it, there was a place called Dorwin Manor that used to be just a few minutes down the road. But I will tell you about that another time, and we're running a little late, although I did start a little late too. So let's do our reading for today and see what we've got. So yeah, I mean, not necessarily spooky. If you were there and looking at it, you would have just been like, what the actual, like, what is it? So I don't know. It's just very, very strange. So, and the recycling truck is coming, so hopefully that won't make too much background noise. Oh, and look at this. What's our first card? I was just talking about this, right? Conditioning is our first card, okay? Figuring out, getting rid of our conditioning. Having the voice being heard, particularly the voice of the feminine in this case, I think. And the inner feeling of which we're unaware is trust, okay? This is where we have to trust in the process. This is Page of Cups, energy. Boom, yeah, boom, chakalaka. Yeah, there's a Joanne. So yeah, this is we are getting out of our conditioning, and we need to trust what's going on, because the external feeling is we're aware that we're in the midst of this change. And obviously with a major arcana, we're talking about a change that is outside of, this is something that's happening to us. It's not something that we are, it's something happening to us. It's not something that we are initiating on our own. Okay, this is something like this. So we need to get out of our head. Eight of Swords, need to get out of our head. Need to get out of the guilt mindset. Need to get out of the shame mindset. Need to get out of the mindset that says that you're not worthy, or what you're doing is not important, or that creative work or what you have to create is not important. Okay, that seems to be the thing. It's like, no, when Spirit is continually, including some real heavy hitters, like I said, I'm dealing with Azrael, who, even though he says he's not technically the angel of death, he kind of is, kind of not. I mean, you're talking about some rather grim sounding figures, but they're just kind of like, hey, you guys really need to play. You guys really need to enjoy life, I'm even hearing it from that quarter, so from the angelic quarter. So yeah, you got it. This is, and we all know that the Eight of Swords in the Rider-Waite deck is the person who's tied up amidst all these swords and blindfolded. They've allowed their mind to just completely eclipse everything else. And what we need to look at, and we have the Two of Wands here, but you see the eagle flying above. Being able to look at possibilities, being able to fly above. One of the things, if you watch that video about the solar eclipse and the planet Makimaki, is that there was the mythology of the Birdman, or the ritual, kind of almost an initiatory type ritual, right? But it was surrounding the Birdman. It was the terns that had come to the island, and getting the first egg from the tern, and having to swim across and climb up this cliff and all of this stuff. But yeah, it's the idea of the Birdman, and the idea of being able to fly above and to see. And when we think about it, the bird is also a metaphor for the soul. Okay, it's a metaphor. We always think about getting your wing, like the person who's passed away is getting their wings, right? So it's almost, and then we're still talking about this idea of ascension. So it's kind of like, yeah, you're getting your wings. And in this case, when we talk about that, it's more like about we're being able to see over. We're able to see the big picture, because the picture that we have, when we have the earth is important, and we have discounted, but there's way more even to the earth than what we see in front of us. It's not just a commodity to be consumed. It's something that we're a bigger part of here. And to me, this is just getting out of the kind of vision that says, what I see in front of me in the paycheck that I collect is all that there is to life. It's so interesting that when we develop our intellect, when we develop innovations, when we develop things, we develop all of these things that just end up alienating us from the world, because they all come from the mind and this perception that the mind is king. That the mind is what makes us greater than everything else and allows us to be like gods and to control everything else. But that's not the sense in which that energy needs to be used. It's that you have this intellect to be able to interpret and make decisions about your environment, but there's a bigger picture here. So it's a matter of flying above and seeing that bigger picture. So that's what our reading says for today. So probably I'll close with that. Thank you guys so much for joining me. It's weirdly, just because I started a little late, we're actually slightly under time, but but I rarely finish these on time, but we'll do that today. And I hope you all have a really great Tuesday. And I'm just, I just trying to keep track, and I will message everybody. You're welcome. I'll message everybody in the class about what's going on with Kate. She's going to let me know today definitively whether she's going to do the 17th or not. And and you're welcome. You're welcome. And great to have all you guys joining me. And we will see you all tomorrow morning. So take care. Have a good day, and Pat, good luck on your first day on this job. So take care.